Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from round 11 of the 2025 Tata Steel Masters. On the white end, Anish Giri playing against Max Warmerdam. All right, on board we have an Italian game, an Italian, 4 knights, and in this one, Giri is quick to go hunting for the dark square bishop. Bishop b6, he's got that bishop whenever he wants. Now's not the best time to take that bishop. He flicks in a3, in case black tries similar to go hunting for the bishop. We got a square. No rush in taking here. We don't want to activate this rook right away. Follow up, bishop g4. c3. This was an idea to pile up on that pinned knight, so no knight jumps. Bishop h5. And now, how are we getting out of this pin exactly? Well, all right, this is the moment he decides to chop on b6. This removes the defender of e3, and his plan is to simply move the queen to that square. Mission accomplished. We're out of the pin. Giri plays with the bishop pair still. Follow up from here, kingside castles. Knight g4 is not a bother. The queen can fall back to e1. Out of the pin, the knight returns here, the knight can simply move, and eye a sensitive square. So knight g4 wouldn't be helpful to black. He castles. h3 flicked in now. Forget about any jumps. We also have a flight square. Healthy. From here, black's approach is to break in the center. This is going to cost black a pawn at the end. His compensation for the pawn will be active pieces. White's reply here is with knight takes e5. And black's response is with queen d6. So an alternative here for black. What's happening after knight takes queen? This is the Pac-Man variation where both queens and a pair of rooks are tracked down, as well as a pair of knights. At the end of this line, there would be a key move for black, and that is knight e5. It's giving this one an evaluation around plus 0.4 issue on these two squares. It says with best play, you go to f4 and play this position. Rook c8 is considered top, kind of uncomfortable, but all right, considered holdable, this ending here. Also know that responding in this position to knight e5 with bishop b5, the bishop gets harassed with rook a5. You defend the bishop. You can bother it further with c6. Not a direction we go. Black does not respond to knight e5 with knight takes queen. It is queen d6. Also know that knight takes knight would be a blunder, because after this recapture, there's an issue on these 2 points. And how would you save these two pieces? Knight f6 runs into a trick. Bishop takes h6. And that's a second pawn. Bishop pair, up 2 pawns. Completely winning position here for white. No issue in this position about the queen being bothered. Kicking the queen from this square here, for instance, rook e8, there's queen g5. Problem on g7. And rook a5, there's queen g3, keeping the pawn in a pin. And yet again, there's an issue on g7. So in short, this here would be a blunder. Queen d6 in this game. Now we chop on d5, and the queen simply recaptures. If black instead captures on e5 with the queen or the knight, the b pawn is going to fall. So if you start with the queen, we exchange queens, and there you go. B pawn falls, and knight takes knight straight away. Yet again, the b pawn will be down for the count. So it's queen takes bishop here, knight takes knight, and queen e4. This is considered top, offering the queen exchange. Black responds with a top move of his own. He plays rook f to e8. If you exchange queens here on e4, this wouldn't be a good idea, because what we're looking at now, what we would be looking at, is a majority of pawns on the king side for white. And what's close by is a very nice, healthy light square construction to tame this light square bishop. Not a good idea to create this majority for white on the king side, in short. So it's better to question this queen and invite the capture on c6. That's what we have here. Follow-up is with bishop to f4. Now, right around the corner for black are two ideas. One, rook e2, and two, bishop e2. Rook activity is going to be very strong, and also this fork here, tracking down the pawn. You can't really prevent both. So you would like to maybe cut off the rook from getting to the second rank, play bishop to e3, but in comes bishop e2, and there you go, the pawn is simply picked back up. If you try something else, let's say cut out the bishop move, in comes the rook. It's irritating. And how you developing the bishop with the pressure on b2, you don't really want to allow the rook on the second rank. If you try to offset it, this rook continues to be a bug with the check. Do you really want to move the king and be stuck in this pin? It's an uncomfortable situation. We might just end up repeating in a situation like this. So Giri's approach in this position here with these two as strong ideas for black is to go on the offensive. Pinpoint a weak pawn here. Maybe I get the c7 pawn and then b6 pawn. Rook activity is the response. Save the b pawn. Black plays b5. Bishop takes c7. White is up 2 pawns, but black will be getting one of them back shortly. Rook c2. Bishop e5 is played here to defend the pawn. If you're defending in the other way, black could always exchange on c1 first and then swipe the a3 pawn, or be a little fancy and take on a3 straight away. Okay, in this one, it is, after rook c2, bishop e5 to defend c3, and now the bishop slips in to knock out the d3 pawn. So only a 1 pawn advantage here in this opposite color bishop position. Still a draw with best play from here. Rook e3 in this position. Now, in order to make a draw here, or what's going to make life easy for black, is if you could exchange both rooks. Easier said than done, but that's what black is pretty much shooting for in this position here, being down the pawn. This is an important moment. The bishop is under fire. Where should it go? If you like to pause the video, see where you would move this bishop. All right, in the game, bishop g6 is played. This isn't some losing move, but it's sort of a step in the wrong direction. The computer says best is bishop c4. There is a dream square for the bishop, and that is d5. Bishop c4 is a step in that direction. d5 is a dream square because it's defending 2 base points and is defended safely with the pawn. Another way to look at it is that from this d5 square, there isn't a white pawn that could rattle its position. It's a much more stable piece on d5. Now, I'm sure Max was well aware that this is a fantastic square for the bishop, so why didn't he go there? Well, there was a concern here over the g7 square. There's this concern that if you go to c4, after rook g3, what am I doing about g7? In general, black would prefer to stay strong on the dark squares on the king side to tame this dark square bishop. But in this scenario, you would not be able to do that. f6, you just take the pawn. There's the pin. So what black would have to play here in response to g3 is g6. And in general, this is uncomfortable. To weaken these dark squares like this, to extend the scope of that dark square bishop, you start to see these mating patterns where a white rook ends up on that h8 square for mate. It says that this is the correct way to play. I'd like to also note, bishop c4 is not just there eyeing up this golden square d5, it would pave the way for rook a2. Exchanging a pair of rooks. This is desirable. Trying to hold this ending here as black. Trading all rooks, and you're going to have a much easier time holding the draw. What do you do here as white? If this was the path in the game, let's say bishop d4, rook a2. Are we going to exchange rooks? I'm going to win the pawn. What's your option here as white? Let's say you try and keep both rooks on. Well, here's where you would take on a3 with the a2 rook. If you go with this rook, there you go. This is the mate I'm talking about. This is in general why you want to stay strong. You would prefer to stay strong on the dark squares. But in this scenario, you could take with the second rank rook, and you're in a spot to even exchange a pair of rooks like this. Rook here is no problem. You could take, and there's no recapture on this square because there is a pin. This is holdable, and small improvements from here, playing on the black side, get that pawn to g5, and then kind of sneak your king up here and maybe look forward to an f6, g5, and h6 construction. All right, in this game, the bishop goes to g6. From here, bishop d4 and rook e7. There wasn't really a way to stop this rook activity. Rook a7 would have been a blunder. Follow up rook to a6. Now, this is a blunder by black. Already a tricky position. Best is to undo the last move. King g8, very difficult to play in this way, but it says it's best to return and watch over the sensitive f7 pawn. This bishop now runs the risk of being scared away from f7. This is now a strong idea. That's what we see in the game after rook a6. It's g4, and next up, f4, f5. Bishop is nearly trapped, or at least kicked from f7. So it wants to return here rather than the move in the game, rook a6. If king g8 and this same idea of g4 and then f4, f5 is tried, hang on. Black has time for a reposition and bishop c4, and there you are. Bishop is perfect there, watching over the sensitive f7 pawn. All right, how it plays out in this game, rook a6 on board. Now comes g4. Follow up king to g8 at this point, too late. Check. Rook f8. Perfect post. The rook functioning like a rook in both directions. Pressure on the pawn. Restriction really on both pieces here. These two are frozen because of the rook post on f8. No good moves. Now, what's right around the corner for white is rook e1, rook e8, and mate. Black's play is with rook to e2 here, if something else is tried. For instance, f6. It's already difficult enough trying to tame these two active pieces. If you play f6 here, this rook will be able to get to the 7th rank, and that will be a disaster. Pinned pawn, bishop takes f6 right around the corner. What would black do here? If you take the pawn, take on a3, there's rook e7, and there you go. That's happening very soon. And if something like this, bishop d3, trying to sneak away with the king, there's no sneaking away. Rook g8 is cool, and you could even chop away on f6 straight away. Pawn takes bishop, mate. So 3 attackers like this would be too much to handle for black. So he plays rook e2, and comes f4. This right here is almost like a third attacker, this 4th rank pawn duo, ready to squash the bishop. Follow up from here is with f5. If you play in a different way, just going one step, there's going to follow, white could follow here with f5, and even go after a rook, try and get a rook off. This is winning. This would be winning for white. Very active rook still. If you move the bishop in this position, the rook gets to the 7th rank, hits the bishop, sets up bishop captures pawn. And the alternative, not fun, going into a self-pin. How do you get out of it? You got to go for these moves, but yet again, you could always meet that bishop move with rook to f7. There are ways to improve here for white, slowly and steadily, and there is just not a great way to improve for Team Black. These slow improving moves I'm talking about for white are these here, where you shoot for the g5 break and in the end overtake that f6 pawn. We get some captures here. The king ends up on g5, and these are the only pawns that remain on the king's side. And that's good news once you overtake f6, because that extends the scope. It would extend the scope of the dark square bishop to a square right next to the king, which would make that unpinning idea of bishop d7 not so appealing. Rook f7 would be there with a fork straight away. All right. In this game, we do not see the f pawn take one step. 2 in this game. Pawn takes bishop h5. And now we just want to get to the 7th rank. So rook c7 next up. Can go to f7. And we might as well, on our way to this 7th rank, keep pressure on something. So black is going to be there just in time with this check to defend this sensitive g7 square. But now that third attacker enters the scene. Follow up from here, rook takes a3, good as any. And the way to crack this one open here is with f6. And black's response is with bishop d5. The threat here is to give a check, and checkmate in a couple different ways. Also, if you move the pawn or capture the pawn, that would extend the scope of the rook, and we would have mate. So this pawn can't move or capture. What other try is there besides the move in the game? Bishop d5. Let's look at just one other move. Let's say the rook defends the 8th rank. Well, here's the thing. The rook could still go to the 8th rank. A fancy fork could be flicked in there with a follow-up fork. And this is completely winning. You could insert this check, take with the rook, and next up there are 4 different discovered checkmates right around the corner. So that's not going to work. Rook to a8 in this position, nor is the move in the game bishop d5, because after this final move, 38, f7 check, black resigns. You can't take the pawn. If you move, you're getting mated. Pawn is ready to promote. And if you take the pawn, we take the rook. Of course, completely winning here for Team White. So, interesting game. Opposite color bishop game here. Important moment, without question. Most important moment of the game when this bishop was questioned. Where do you go? Where's the correct diagonal? c4 was best in this case. When you're on g6, you're inviting these ideas here to rattle that bishop's position. But again, black, I believe at least, was concerned about this dark square pressure and really would prefer, his preference was to sidestep these dark square weaknesses. But this is still a fine approach for black in this case. All right, how it played out in this game after the move f7 check, black resigns. So what did you think of this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.